Okay, Rosalia erzählt uns nachher in einem Vortrag, macht sie ein Intro. Das ist eine von unseren Kollegen. Leider kann sie heute nicht live sein, aber sie wird später auch online sein. Ja, ein Vortrag heißt Artistic Epistemologies from the Aftermath of Colonialism and the Question of Indigeneity in Southeast Asia. Dann, sie wird nachher in eine Konversation mit dem Regisseur Riar Rizaldi über den Film Tellurian Drama. Also jetzt sehen wir uns an einen kleinen Film, ungefähr 10 Minuten von Rosalia und danach Tellurian Drama und gleich danach das Interview. Leider ist es so, dass über Zoom wird nur das Intro und das Interview gestreamt. Während dem Kurzfilm leider aus rechtlichen Gründen darf man das nicht über Zoom streamen. So, und jetzt starten wir. So.
Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu unserem Workshop heute. Ich freue mich sehr, dass ihr da seid. Und vielen Dank auch an Isra, dass du vor Ort die Moderation übernimmst und dafür sorgst, dass es alles funktioniert, dass wir hier durch verschiedene Zeiten, weil diese Konversation ist jetzt pre-recorded und nachher komme ich dann live dazu, dass wir trotzdem diesen Raum schaffen können, um über bestimmte Sachen nachzudenken und zu sprechen. Zum Ablauf heute werden wir nach meiner kurzen Einführung einen Film zeigen, Tellurian Drama von dem indonesischen Filmemacher Riar Rizaldi. Und danach im Anschluss wird es ein Live-Zoom-Gespräch geben zwischen mir und dem Filmemacher und vor allem, um euch die Möglichkeit zu geben, vor Ort auch Fragen zu stellen oder Kommentare oder eben um ins Gespräch zu kommen. Und ich möchte jetzt nicht zu viel über den Film verraten, weil ihr den gleich alle anschauen werdet, aber möchte ein bisschen aus meiner eigenen Forschung auch erzählen und den Kontext dafür geben. Und zwar, ich bin Anthropologin und arbeite mit Filmemachern in Indonesien zusammen zu fragen, wie kann man durch künstlerische Strategien und vor allem durch die Produktion von Kurzfilmen bestimmte Themen, die mit Umweltschutz, aber auch mit Umweltzerstörung, die in Indonesien eine alltägliche Realität ist für viele Menschen, umzugehen. Und der erste Kontext, der oft vergessen wird bei diesen Themen, aber ich denke sehr, sehr wichtig ist, darüber nachzudenken, ist natürlich der Fakt, dass Indonesien kolonialisiert wurde und dass die Realität heute, obwohl die Kolonialmächte verschiedene, aber zur längsten Zeit holländische Kolonialmächte nicht mehr im Land vor Ort sind. Aber trotzdem gibt es immer noch Nachwirkungen und Effekte aus dieser Kolonialzeit. Und eine Sache, die besonders heraussteht für mich und auch so subtil passiert ist, dass wir nicht sehr, sehr viel darüber nachdenken, ist der Wissenschaft. Es gibt einen wissenschaftlichen Begriff dafür, Epistemicide. Und hier geht es darum, dass verschiedene Wissenssysteme und verschiedene Arten und Weisen in der Welt zu sein und sich mit der Natur zu verbinden, durch die Kolonisation und während der Kolonisationszeit unterdrückt wurden. Im Falle von Indonesien war es so, dass die ersten Schulen, also die ersten kolonialen Schulen, es gab natürlich vorher auch schon Modelle, wie Wissen weitergegeben wurde innerhalb von der Kultur und den Gemeinschaften, aber dass mit Einführung der Schulen ganz bestimmte Wissenssysteme, und zwar westliche Enlightenment-Wissenssysteme, immer privilegiert wurden. Und es ging darum, Fakten von Fiction zu unterscheiden und dieses Wissen innerhalb von Systemen zu legitimisieren und immer mit der wissenschaftlichen Methode, dass nur die Dinge, die wir sehen können und wissenschaftlich beweisen können, letztendlich wahr sind. Und mit diesem ganzen Themenkomplex wurde auch die Idee eingeführt, dass der Mensch außerhalb der Natur steht und auch in einer hierarchischen Position überhalb der Natur oder die Natur dominierend. Und basierend auf dieser Idee, dass der Mensch besonders ist und diese Macht hat und die Natur als Ressource ausnutzen kann, auf dieser Idee basiert Kapitalismus, die kapitalistische Globalisierung der Welt, die letztendlich, wie wir jetzt auch sehen und gelernt haben, der Grund ist für viele Umweltprobleme und den Klimawandel. Also wir haben diese Idee, dass verschiedene Mythen oder verschiedene Rituale, die von Kulturen durchgeführt werden, die nicht westlich sind, die werden oft als Aberglaube bezeichnet und in dieser Hierarchie weiter unten angesetzt. Diese Idee von über die Zeit modernisieren sich verschiedene Länder und werden so wie der Westen. Und wir befinden uns jetzt in der spannenden Phase, wo diese Konzepte langsam beginnen, keinen Sinn mehr zu machen und wo wir überall auf der Welt, aber eben an manchen Orten mehr mit den schrecklichen Folgen von dieser Einstellung, dass der Mensch außerhalb der Natur ist, dass es diese Trennung gibt und dass die Natur ausgebeutet werden kann bis zum geht nicht mehr. Und an dieser Stelle ist es schön, sich Perspektiven anzuschauen. Und das ist natürlich auch eine dekolonialisierende Praxis, nicht immer über andere Menschen zu sprechen, sondern diese Hierarchie aufzuheben und zu schauen, was andere Menschen sprechen und denken über diese Themen. Und genau das macht der Film. Und deswegen möchten wir diesen Film zeigen. Und eben die Betonung darauf zu schauen, dass nicht immer alles vom Westen aus einer westlichen Position definiert werden kann, sondern aus der Erfahrung heraus von Klimawandel, von kolonialen Zuständen in dem Land, in dem man aufwächst. Was kommen da für Geschichten? Und wir sind hier beim Indigenen Filmfestival und der Begriff Indigenität in Südostasien ist spannend, weil Südostasien eine Region ist, wo nicht immer ganz klar ist, wer ist indigen und wer nicht, wie zum Beispiel in manchen Ländern in Südamerika das klarer ist. Und ich freue mich sehr darauf, mit dem Filmemacher genau über diese Dynamik in Südostasien zu sprechen. Und ich freue mich sehr, diesen Film zu zeigen, weil er für mich einfach uns, und das möchte ich auch gerne mitgeben, wenn ihr den Film euch jetzt anschaut, nochmal zu hinterfragen, warum gibt es diese Idee in wissenschaftlichen Diskursen, die aber dann wiederum in politische Diskurse und auch in Programme zum Klimawandel übersetzt werden. Diese Art von Wissen, die dort reinfließt, ist oft immer auf Fakten basiert und auf Methode. Und ich glaube, dass wir sehr viel verlieren, wenn wir Fiktion und Spekulation auch eben, um nicht das, was ist, im Moment zu reproduzieren, sondern sich zu überlegen, wie kann es anders sein und wie können wir diese Welt anders gestalten, also sozusagen als Samen für andere Zukünfte und andere Situationen. Was können wir hier aus künstlerischen Geschichten lernen oder an Inspiration bekommen, weil wir sonst uns in diesem ständigen Kreislauf von der Reproduktion, von Rassismus, von Extraktivismus, dem Benutzen der Natur als Ressource befinden und wie können wir da ausbrechen. Und ich denke, dass die Arbeit von Riar hier einige Antworten oder einige Perspektiven gibt, die sehr wichtig und sehr wertvoll sind, in diesen Fragen zu beachten. Und das basierend einfach darauf, dass wir die Probleme nicht mit den gleichen, die wir jetzt haben weltweit, nicht mit den gleichen Denkweisen lösen können, die diese Probleme verursacht haben. Und ich möchte jetzt gar nicht mehr so viel vorwegnehmen. Genießt den Film, lasst euch darauf ein. Es ist ein sehr, sehr schöner Film. Ich freue mich, den gemeinsam hier zu teilen. Und Riar und ich werden später dazukommen und dann können wir nochmal den Film gemeinsam besprechen und einfach diesen Raum schaffen und eben genau vor dem Hintergrund, dass die Lösungen, die uns allen wahrscheinlich noch nicht klar sind, in ganz viele Arten und Weisen spekulativ, künstlerisch sein könnten, was es da für Wege gibt und dass die Lösungen nicht von Individuen alleine kreiert werden können, sondern dass wir gemeinsam über diese Dinge nachdenken. Und ja, deswegen haben wir jetzt auch diesen virtuellen, temporären Raum, um über diese Fragen nachzudenken. Ich wünsche euch ganz viel Spaß beim Film und wir sehen uns gleich. Und dann übergebe ich hiermit wieder an Isra. Vielen Dank und bis später.
Und so, ich sehe es, sind die beiden noch nicht da hier im Zoom. Ich würde dann erst anfangen mit einem Interview von den beiden, weil Rosalia hatte auch gesagt, 17 Uhr sind die online, aber bisher sind die noch nicht.
Hallo, könnt ihr mich hören?
Ja. Hallo Rosalia.
Hallo. Ah, okay, jetzt sehe ich mich auch.
Gut, dann ich übergebe dir und soweit Ria da ist, dann
Genau, Ria ist gerade im Moment noch nicht da, dann warten wir noch. Genau, um 17 Uhr kommt er. Der müsste eigentlich jeden Moment kommen.
Soll ich das Mikrofon erstmal übergeben für Fragen, falls das Publikum Fragen an dich?
Genau, wenn das Publikum Fragen hat,
okay.
dann können wir die auch gerne schon sammeln und ich übersetze dann auch. Und Ria ist auch schon hier.
Do you have some questions about? If you have ones, can ask this micro.
Hello, Riar.
So Ria is there.
Hey,
Yes.
how are you?
Thank you so much for joining us in this
No worries,
online.
thanks.
Okay. Thank you so
I pass
much
over to you both.
Yes. Can you hear us well?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So if there are already questions from the audience, then I don't even want to interrupt, then we can.
No questions till now. Oh,
okay.
Hey, ich würde tatsächlich erstmal auf Deutsch fragen und dich vielleicht so übersetzen. Ich glaube, das kannst du besser als ich.
Ja.
Genau, schön, dass ihr jetzt dabei seid. Vielen Dank. Hat auch Spaß gemacht, diesen Film nochmal zu sehen. Ich verstehe es ein bisschen so, dass da verschiedene Narrative aufgegriffen werden, die ja auch so ein bisschen umeinander konkurrieren oder sich verflechten. Nicht so ganz klar ist, wessen Narrative sind es eigentlich? Was ist so, was ist sozusagen koloniale Ideologie? Was sind vorherrschende Diskurse von Leuten, die zum Beispiel mit den Ruinen, mit der Baustelle zu tun haben, die jetzt vor Ort leben, die früher vor Ort gelebt haben? Was kommt von Riar? Da wird sozusagen eine Vergangenheit, über eine Vergangenheit spekuliert, eine Vergangenheit vielleicht konstruiert. Und ich würde euch gerne fragen, welche Chancen, aber welche Risiken ihr vielleicht auch darin seht, wenn wenn so ein bisschen diese Unklarheit sozusagen herrscht. Verstehst du?
Okay. Thank you for this question. Ria, I'm gonna translate the question first.
Okay.
Okay, so basically the question was concerning the Tellurian drama in your work and considering the different layers or the different narratives that are coexisting in a way in the work, but also kind of stand in, not in opposition, but are kind of like, yeah, like there are different narratives coexisting, and it is not always very clear or traceable whose narrative it is. Like there's the colonial ideology, there are the dominant discourses, that also have their roots in the past, and then there is this speculation and this reconstruction of the past also. And so the question is going into this direction, and I think it would be great if you can unpack a bit about your process, and then also about maybe on a meta level, then also reflecting on the chances and also on the risks of having this vagueness in different narratives. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So in the context of theory and drama, true, yeah, because there's so much layer in the narratives, but in the end it's also my reflection for myself as one Indonesian, as well as a person who are coming from that kind, that, so the radio station is very close to my parents' house. So from a person who came from that area, I heard a lot of stories and narratives from a different kind of perspective. Like there's a narratives that are coming from the indigenous people in there, but also there's a narrative from the people who are coming from, I don't know, like historian, like the one who always think that the history is the actual, the actuality of what happened, you can trace through history, something like that. And then also there's the people who are basically just work in there, and then basically just a guardian of that landscape. So for me, it's all about this kind of like reflections of myself as well, and then my relation to that landscape, and then the film tried to kind of like showing this reflection through a different narrative, because I grew up with this totally different narratives about that landscape. So yeah, but along in the process of making this, I met the person who are also in the films singing and then playing the sitar, the instrument, and his name is Iman Jimbot. And Iman Jimbot, he came from that area, so he was born in that area, and his ancestor is the workers for the radio, and he's a good friend of mine. And he also believes in this idea that the mountain is the tools to kind of like communicate to have a communication with the nature in this sense, like the forest, the landscape in that area. So when I make the films, I try to have a conversation with him, and then try to create the narrative. The half end of the films is basically his narratives, the way that the way he thinks about that landscape. So that's why it's mostly improvised. Like the way that he plays the music is basically we just record that when the first time he went to that area. So he just opened his instrument and then play intuitively, and then very improvised, as well as the chanting, I don't know what to call, the kind of like the offering, like a voices offering in the end. It's also the way that he communicate with the mountains. And I don't put the subtitles on that part because I don't even understand the language that he says. So it's like really I don't know how to say it. It's like it's an old Sundanese language, but yeah, it's something that I cannot understand. And even when I asked to him, and he said it's better for me to not understand. So that's why I don't put in the subtitles. But basically, yeah, to answer your questions, it's my reflection as an Indonesian. Growing up with the idea of nation state, growing up with the idea of really there's a lot of there's a legacy of colonialism, there's also a legacy of dictatorism at the same time, and then I try to reflect myself and my connection to nature, and obviously it has a different kind of like narratives every time I try to reflect that. So that's why it's kind of like mix a lot of narratives.
Okay, thank you. Should I translate to German, or did everyone understand? I'm happy to translate, so I took notes so that we can make sure that everyone understands.
I think everyone has understand it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you very much for.
Yeah, I've got a question as well, not as elaborate, I guess. So the film is from 2020, so last year, and showed these pictures and said that like the local government is trying to use that place as also like a tourist attraction. And I was wondering how the local population, how people in that region relate to that. Are they in support of it or not? And how's that sort of that process going, as it's like commercializing this, possibly commercializing this area? Yeah, that's just a quick question.
Yeah, thanks for the questions. Yeah, so it's really interesting because that happens a lot in Indonesia. Like there's a lot of places and landscape that are actually forgotten or like, you know, never written in the history. And then all of a sudden it get blows up or like get viral or whatever. And then the government always like, oh yeah, we should kind of like, you know, I don't know, creating this place as some sort of, you know, basically commodified that place. So what's really interesting in this case is that because the old radio station was actually really for the, you know, no one ever even remember like what's the history of that radio station. But one day the prince of so Dutch prince, I don't know, like prince of the Netherlands came to Indonesia, and then because they have this kind of like bilateral, I don't know, diplomatic relation, whatever. So he tried to indexing a lot of places that are actually built by the Dutch in the colonial time. And then one of the places that he visits is the radio stations. So because he visits that radio stations, and then the local government thought that, oh, so it's actually important, this place. So, and then the local government tried to propose to you know, to kind of get some funds or grants from the Dutch government to make the place as a tourist attraction, especially like an outdoor museum. And then it was actually approved, and then the Indonesian government also involved. But the local in that area, they are basically so the local in that area, it's not people, it's not people that are coming from there. So people who are coming from that area is actually already moved, most of them already moved, you know, in the foothill. So a lot of people who are now in the area, it's also, it's not so-called indigenous, quote unquote indigenous in that area. But the tourist attractions actually bring quite a lot, you know, in terms of financial and economy. It brings quite something to the community there. So the community is actually really open to the you know, this commodification of places. But because it was right before the pandemic, so now it's like because of the pandemic it closed, and then, you know, I don't know, it's somehow it's also now a bit abandoned. But because of the, I guess, even before it becomes a tourist attraction, it's already a campsite. Like a lot of campers, it's campers the right word? I don't know. It's like people who went to the mountain and then building a camp. Usually they come there and then you know, buy some snacks or whatever from the local people there. Even before that, it was already commodified, but now it's like really accelerate by making that place as a tourist attraction. So yeah, to answer your questions, is actually the community is actually really welcome, because it brings economy for them, because before they just only get money from the, you know, the campers and the people who were camped there. And it's actually also illegal for some people to open a snack bar in there, because there's some regulation, like government regulation, to open like snack bars or whatever, in especially up in the mountain. So when the government wants to open it as a tourist attraction, it opens a lot of like opportunities for the locals, but also at the same time it really commodifying that place. And then actually also, you know, a lot of history, and especially the history about the indigenous people in that area, or like the ancestor of the indigenous people who work in the to build the basically the slave to build the radio is never mentioned by the in the narratives, in the government narratives. So for them, and also at the same time, because there's this so-called hidden history that the indigenous people actually, you know, loot the place and then take a lot of the technology, so the government felt like shame, so they never mentioned that as well. So it's always kind of like, oh, this is the legacy of colonialism, and then the building as a symbol for the advancement of technology. So in terms of like a tourist place, we need to kind of like, I don't know, educate the people in Indonesia that at some point this place, you know, one of the most advanced place in the Southeast Asia, because there's a radio station. Yeah, I hope that answered the questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So more questions? There. Do you have a question? Oh, here.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe just a short one, like how did you find the material you worked with, like the photos, but there's also a lot of drawings, and maybe also the question, like how is it connected to this idea of speculative realism, I think, which is important for the movie, like where does it start, like yeah, I don't know, in which ways do you try to be very precise, and where do you start to speculate?
Yeah, thanks. So the materials, yeah, it's really the materials is really interesting, because what is it called, the Tropen Museum have some photos of the Tropen Museum in the Netherlands. They have some photos from the building, but a lot of the photos and video is actually taken from a hobbyist in the Netherlands, and this hobbyist, I think he's collecting a lot of history of technology in Asia, and he had the material taken from the engineer who worked in the building, in the radio station back at the time. So I guess he buy from the family of the engineer, and then he uploaded in his website. So I have I contact him, so I have a lot of the materials from him, as well as from the Tropen Museum. So I guess because it's really minor in terms of history of colonialism in Indonesia, so even Tropen Museum only have like a 10 or 15 images or pictures, and then a lot of images and footage is basically scattered around the world and owned by hobbyists, or like people who are really into the history of technology and the alternative history of technology, and whatnot. So yeah, I got it from collectors and hobbyists. So I just asked for their permission. And yeah, in terms of speculation or speculative, I mean, I'm always interested with the idea of world building, and I'm always interested with the idea of you know, like creating I don't know, like speculative fiction and something like that. And in terms of this films, in this context of these films, I was really inspired by the environmental movement in Indonesia in the 70s. So the environmental movement in Indonesia in the 70s is the only, I would say, like social movement that are allowed to operate by the regime. So Indonesia has been like, well, since 32 years was under a military dictatorship. So anything relates to like social movement is prohibited or banned, except the environmental movement. It's because the environmental movement was taught by the dictators as some kind of like a movement that, you know, at some point relates to their politics, because they're always take an example that I don't know, in a communist China or in communist Russia, that industrialization is actually destroying the nature. So they use this narrative and saying that, okay, so if you are talking about the environment, then you're okay. But they cannot have a political will. So they cannot like, you know, they cannot voicing anything that relates to like a social change. So basically it's just like environment and ecology, and then you know, like more into like technicalities of environmentalism. But a lot of the writers back at the time in the 70s, they tried to speak up about the social and then the social issues, and at some point also cultural issues, using a lot of like really new agey and then somehow like really pseudoscientific language to conceal their political will. And I thought this is really interesting because it you know, those kind of languages or narratives that they use, for example, like they speak a lot about that the earth has a vibration, and then the vibration could actually protect the earth and all of this kind of stuff, is the same language that used in the science fiction, you know, like especially science fiction who are written by people like, for example, like Ursula Le Guin. So at the same time, I see this connection of, you know, speculating, try to speak about some issues like ecology and environment using this really a weird word or almost like pseudoscientific word to speak about something, to speak about any kind of social issues. So I guess to answer your question, that's kind of like connection that I try to build, is to imagining the characters, to imagining these characters of Munarwan as some sort of like the people who try to conceal his idea about social change in Indonesia by using this kind of like language, by using this idea or like imagination about, I don't know, like geoengineering and stuff like that. So that's where I guess yeah, the idea of speculation and then speculative fictions is yeah, operating in this work.
Okay. I think one thing that I would also be really interested in, since this is like now a workshop as part of the film festival that is featuring indigenous perspectives, and the term indigenous, and during our curator sessions, we also were talking about this a lot. What does the term even mean? Because it comes from a specific background. And then I would be really interested to hear from you a bit about how you also feel in the situation in Indonesia, where the term indigenous, but you also said quote unquote, is kind of used, but then the situation is a bit different because there has been a lot of, I mean, the experience of colonialism, yes, but also this artificially created nation state with so many people. And yeah, maybe if you can talk a bit about this. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, that's the word that are so confusing in Indonesia, because basically the word indigenous, it means different in Indonesian language even. So well, now the translation of indigenous is masyarakat adat, which means totally different than the idea of indigenous in, I don't know, maybe outside Indonesia. So in Indonesia, it's like it's more related to customary laws, like it's related to like, you know, some sort of like a belief system that are really situated and really specific into one location. So and then on the other side, it's like the idea of Indonesia itself as a nation state is just so weird, because it's an island, it's an archipelago. Like it's, you know, if we want even to talk about like ethnicity, so-called ethnicity in Indonesia, there's like 250 something of ethnic group, and that's already like, you know, really really complex in terms of like how we understand the idea of, you know, indigeneity. And then especially there's also a lot of like, you know, cross-cultural. So for example, like my parents comes from different islands, like my mom's comes from different islands from my father's, and it comes from a really different social order and really different customary law. So it becomes like really complex in a way. So for me personally, the word indigenous itself it's interesting, one, and then second, it's also, we try to think that this word have a meaning that relates to like giving a voice for people who are repressed by the state, especially by Indonesia as a state, because the Indonesian as a state also like really, I would say like really super conservative in terms of like, for example, like belief system. There's only like six beliefs, six religious or belief system that are allowed to be practiced in Indonesia, and it's so institutionalized, so people couldn't like if you for example the person who are perform in my films in Tellurian drama, Iman Jimbot, he doesn't follow this like 5 or 6 official religion. So basically he believes his own like cosmology, or his own like people in a specific area, the knowledge that are come from area, but the government couldn't, but he has to have one that are official for the government, so then he can make an ID, like like a national ID, because if he doesn't have an ID, then he cannot go to work, he cannot go to school, and blah blah blah. So the country, the nation state itself is really like pushing a lot of agenda to unify the whole nation, the whole archipelago, but it's really, yeah, it's really complex, because the country has this slogan, unity in diversity or something like that, but in terms of practice it doesn't feel like that, because they only give you choices to have 6 religious whatever, so it's not that free. You don't have that kind of like a freedom to for even for your own belief system. So yeah, again, so for me personally, the word indigenous in this case, it really relates to kind of like giving voices to people who are never heard, or like people who are actually, their narrative is like either repressed or like, I don't know, like prohibited to be discussed or something like that by the country or by the nation state. So yeah, that's kind of like a short or brief background for me to kind of explain the idea of indigeneity in Indonesia.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very complex
We have
history,
the
definitely.
next question behind.
Yes, wonderful.
So I have maybe to move
Hello,
the
can
camera.
you hear me? Okay. No, it's fine. I mean, mine is not a very interesting question, but it's just about, by the way, I mean, I really liked it, and especially the cinematography of it, and the how you played with sound and the pictures at the same time. But what I wanted to just know is that how long did it actually take for you to make it?
It's super short actually. I mean, but the research is quite long. So I've been back and forth without a camera to come to the radio station. It's maybe like 3 months, but the shooting is just like 3 days. Basically just shoot a lot of meeting people, especially the guardian, the people who are guarding the forest, the guy who give a lot of informations, and then bring my friends Iman Jimbo to react to the mountain, and the other one is just like shooting the footage or whatever, the landscape. But the research, that's pretty long. So the research, the reading, the writing, that probably take like, I don't know, like 3 months, and then including me back and forth, and then try to meet people, contacting people. So yeah, so all of yeah, maybe 4 to 3 months for the whole process of making this. Oh, and then also include editing and stuff, and then that probably like 5 months or something.
So yes. Hi, Ria. Hi.
Hey.
I'm one of the curators of the festival, and yes, we like your work very well. We're also intrigued a little bit.
Thanks.
And I hope I'm not spoiling anything when I say that I mean, colonialism is one of the topics in most of your films. And so my question is, if you are a part of a kind of a wave in Indonesia, or I mean, if there are many young filmmakers like you going that path, or it is something, is your thing, or only few of filmmakers?
Actually, Rosalia can answer that. question because she researched the film scene in Indonesia. But I'm not sure in the film scene, but in the art scene, maybe it's much more intense in terms of like, you know, discussing this issue of colonialism. And then actually it's one of the big narrative, I think, in the contemporary art scene. But in the film scene, I'm actually not sure. Maybe Rosalia could answer that questions actually.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like there's so many films produced in Indonesia, and I definitely only have my own experience of the ones that I saw. But yeah, since I've been working with film communities in Indonesia a lot, and they produce mostly short films, I think also because of budget reasons, because most of them are like non-commercial films, and talking about local social issues in many cases. And what I was seeing as a very much like summarizing as a tendency now was really a lot of, when it comes to documentary, more going into the direction of social realism, and the documentary, an idea of documentary of that is like representing what is. So I think to come back to your question, it is not in the film world maybe, and I agree with Riar, in the art world there's more direct critique of colonialism, like also spelled out or developed into something more speculative. But in the works that I see, is there's like all these documentaries talk about issues that if you trace it back have their roots in colonialism and in epistemicide and the killing of knowledge system, and in the reverberations of colonialism also. But it is not necessarily like depicted as a topic as such, if that makes sense. So they're dealing with it, but it's not really the main theoretical focus, because it's much closer at the social issue, I think, for most of the works that I have seen. And this is also when that I was going, I think, in experimental film, and we had a lot of I had a lot of conversations about this also with filmmakers in Indonesia, why there is such a like kind of almost this dogma within these film communities of social realist documentary making and speculative and more experimental cinema is also something that exists, but it's maybe even like smaller, the scene, I guess, and more at the intersection to art really. And yeah, I know that there is a film festival, documentary and experimental film festival in Jakarta that has been running for a very long time. And they also host workshops and discussion called Forum Lenteng, and the film festival is Archipel. And the discussions there are very much on this level, talking about colonialism and what it means to the current condition. But in many of the other film communities, I have found the discussions to be much more on closer to the topics, basically. Yeah, if that, I don't know, Riar, if that's just like from my perspective.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
Because my background is not from the film world as well. I'm from the art world, but because my practice relates to films, and that's why. But it's actually, I guess that's what happened in Indonesia.
So, maybe it's okay. So more questions here from the public? No more? So I have 3 questions maybe. So one is, Riar, you know how many nations or how many cultures there are in Indonesia? And the second one, what is the name of this instrument for the last artist? Sitar, because it's beautiful, and you told about you don't know what he's singing about. If they want.
Yeah. So your first question is how many culture? Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's a lot. Definitely a lot. It's like even, you know, every, I don't know, maybe every 20 kilometers, or like 50 kilometers, it has a different language. So I guess language also, you know, determine culture. So at some point it becomes like I don't know, like the official, like the countries declare that there's around like 200 something ethnic group, but there's like 700 languages or something like that. Like, yeah, around 700 languages. Like one, I think Indonesia is like the second country that has many languages. So first is Papua New Guinea, and then the instrument, yeah, it's a called sitar. It's really interesting because a friend of mine, Iman Jimbot, who is in the film, he is also a musician that only play Sundanese instrument, like instrument built by the Sundanese people, and then this instrument is actually, well, the way they see the instrument, it's not only an instrument. So it's actually also a tools for communication, like a tools to kind of like to communicate with like a beyond the tangible reality, which is really interesting because it's also really relates to like vibrations and signals and all of this really interesting stuff. And yeah, and he told me that so he used this really old archaic, like really ancient Sundanese language in the end, which I don't understand. I understand Sundanese language, but the archaic version I don't really understand. But he says that it relates to like offering, like giving, like greeting the mountains, and then saying that, oh, I'm here, and then we try to kind of like communicate with the mountain or something like that. But whenever I ask him, can you give me some, you know, text for me to make a subtitle, and he just ignore. So in the end, I thought, oh yeah, that's maybe like interesting to just like, maybe there's a lot of part in the word that we don't have to understand, or maybe it's even meaningless. I don't know. So it's really interesting for me to just like let the narratives ends with this kind of like, you know, I don't know, like some kind of mystery or something. Yeah.
Thank you. And so maybe it's only a listen for the music, because I think this is a beautiful song.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the actual recording of the music is actually 45 minutes. So I have to cut that because it's super long, and it's he plays until he kind of like get really in the trance state. Like we have to stop him at some point because it gets raining. Quite funny. But yeah, but the actual recording is actually 45 minutes of him playing with the sitar in one place, and then in the other place it was like maybe 10 minutes or something. So and then he just improvised, and then I don't know, like he always said to me that yeah, I'm playing because of there's this vibration from the mountain. So the mountains kind of like give me some ideas to play in this note and note. I mean, he's really interesting as an artist as well.
So may I ask more questions here? Otherwise, I will give you over to Rosalia.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Just a short that just came up when you were talking about wanting to put the subtitles first and then not putting them. I think it's also when we think about films that engage with marginalized communities or with indigenous communities, it is also this like this need to understand everything and to present to the audience everything is also kind of a colonial demand. So I like it when there is this in and out of understanding, and there is like still this like we can't understand everything, and they don't have to give and share everything, claiming this right to also remain opaque. I think it's also something really powerful, and I've seen that in other works too. And I think it is something that the audience needs to, we as an audience then need to grow more comfortable to not be in a position to grasp and understand everything. And I think that's even like we can understand as you said, you really like the music and you think it's beautiful. So maybe we understand something else on a non-rational level. Yeah. Yeah, if there are no more questions, then it's late for you. So we would let you sleep, and thank you very much for joining us and sharing more on your really wonderful practice. And thank you to Isra for managing everything, and to everyone in the cinema for coming and for your questions.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks everyone who come.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And the applause is for you both.
Thank you.
Nice to see you there. And I hope you have a well sleep, Riar.
Thanks.
Which hour is there?
It's like, almost... like 11:30 or something. I mean, it's okay.
Okay. You can drink espresso. The book. Okay, we wish you the best. So
Thanks.
I speak for our team, and I think also for our Polycom, and still healthy. Because
you too.
And
have a wonderful rest of the festival.
Let's have a nice time, Rosalia, and
thank you.
We wish you were here both.
Unfortunately, I have to run to the opening now.
See you the next time.
See you.
Bye.
Here and everything, whatever. So, okay.